Okay, hello there. So today I want to discuss adverse selection. Okay, so before we jump into the definition of adverse selection, I want us to look at the term adverse. Okay, so what do we mean when we say something is adverse? Okay, so adverse simply means unfavorable. Okay, so when we talk about adverse selection, we are talking about an unfavorable selection. All right, so adverse selection occurs when one party or when a person in a transaction or any form of exchange has more information than the other party or the other person. Okay, so when that party or person has more information than the other person, we call that situation as information asymmetry. Okay, so in the situation where you have information asymmetry, you would have an inefficient market outcome, and I will explain why. So adverse selection is a risk associated with insurance and is also linked to asymmetric information. Okay, so let's look at a situation where adverse selection usually occurs. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, it is associated with insurance. Okay, so let's look at the health insurance market. Okay, so how does adverse selection occur here? So people who are generally worried about their health, or people who know that they are sick or susceptible to getting any form of illness, are the ones who usually pay for health insurance, right? And people, as compared to people who are fit, right? So in this case, you have people who are not generally fit going for health insurance, and this leads to adverse selection because the insurance companies usually want a uniform pool of applicants. Okay, so they want people with high risk and low risk. Okay, so in this case, the high risk people would be those who are sick, and then the low risk people will be those who do not usually get sick. Okay, so they want a uniform pool of applicants, but then because of information asymmetry, right, you have adverse selection in this case. Information asymmetry in the sense that the health insurance companies do not know who is sick and who is not. Okay, so one way to deal with adverse selection in the insurance market is to make it compulsory for all. Okay, so for instance, with the health insurance, you want to make it compulsory for all. Okay, so this reasoning can also be linked to car insurance, and then you can also see adverse selection in labor markets and also credit markets. Okay, so the reasoning is the same, or you can apply the logic behind why people go for health insurance in the first example to the other markets. All right, so let's talk about a classic example of adverse selection. Okay, so we are going to discuss the market for lemons. Okay, so the market for Lemons is a paper written by George Akerlof. And this is a classic example of adverse selection. Okay, so what's the story in the market for lemons? So in the market for lemons, George Akerlof describes a situation where you have a market for used cars. Okay, so we are looking at used cars, the used cars market. Okay, so what's the catch here? So here we have in the used cars market, you have the market for the good used cars or high quality used cars, and the bad used cars or low quality used cars. Okay, so he refers to the low quality used cars or bad used cars as lemons. So let's say we have buyers for used cars, and then we have the sellers of the used cars. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, so in the market for used cars, the buyers cannot distinguish between the good used cars and then the bad used cars. Okay, but then the sellers know the good used cars and the bad used cars. Okay, so that's information asymmetry. So the sellers have the information on the quality of the car, but then the buyers do not. Okay, so in that case, the buyers are only willing to pay the average price of the used cars. Okay, so because they are willing to pay the average price of the used cars, the sellers of the high quality or good used cars will eventually exit the market, right? Because they know the quality of the car that they are selling, but then you're not willing to give them that price. Okay, so because of that, they will exit the market and you'll be left with just the bad or low quality used cars, which George Akerlof referred to as lemons in the market. Okay, so this is a classic example of how adverse selection can occur. Okay, so that's it for adverse selection. Let me know if you have any questions